Hi, friends. Welcome back to Get Your Play Online. My name is Michelle, and tonight for Bedtime Stories, we are going to be finishing the second half of our book that we started last week, The Magic Treehouse, book number 11, Lions at Lunchtime. So, we started this book last week. We read the first half of it through page 33. And basically, what happened is that Jack and Annie traveled back in time to the vast plains of Africa, and they come across a field of a bunch of animals trying to cross the river, and they help the animals out crossing the river, but the lions are missing. And Jack keeps asking the question, the lions are missing, where are they? So hopefully we will find out where all the lions are, and we will see what happens on this adventure for Jack and Annie. So let's get started, friends. We are on page 33, chapter 6. It's called Spick and Span. Chapter 6, Spick and Span. Be still, said Jack. Jack and Annie stood frozen as an elephant stepped out of the shadows. It waded into the pond and dipped its trunk into the water. Oh, wow, said Annie. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. An elephant wasn't going to chase them and eat them. Still, the elephant was huge. Let's sneak away, said Jack. But I want to watch, said Annie. Fine, said Jack. He was tired of Annie getting sidetracked. I'm going to solve the riddle by myself. I'll meet you back at the treehouse. He turned to go. A spray of water rained down on him. It came from behind. He shouted with surprise and looked back. The elephant's trunk was pointed straight at Annie. Cool, she cried. He's giving me a shower. The elephant sprayed her again, then again. The mud slowly rolled off her face, her braids, her t-shirt, her shorts, her legs, and her sneakers. I guess the elephant doesn't like dirty kids, said Annie, laughing. Her eyes were squeezed shut. Finally, she was clean and soaking wet. Now it's your turn, she said to Jack. Jack stepped forward and shut his eyes tight. A blast of water hit him. It did feel like a shower, a strong shower. When Jack was all cleaned, the elephant let out a grunt. Then he started to splash himself with water. Thanks, said Annie. Yeah, thanks, said Jack. I'm spick and span now, said Annie. When the sun dries me off, I'll be like new. Good, said Jack. Now we can get serious. He picked up his heavy pack. We have to figure out the answer to the riddle so we can leave this place before we run into real trouble. He looked around nervously. Where are the lions? He wondered. A small bird flitted near his head. Hi, Annie said to the bird. Jack turned back at her. According to the riddle, we're looking for something gold and sweet. What do you want? Annie asked the bird. The bird twittered and flew around Jack and Annie. Its feathers were dull gray, but it had a bright and happy manner. Annie, listen to me, not the bird, said Jack. The bird kept fluttering around them. She's trying to tell us something, said Annie. Jack let out a long sigh. You're driving me crazy today, he said. But I feel like she needs our help, said Annie. Maybe her babies fell out of a nest. Annie, you can't save every animal in Africa, said Jack. This bird is important, said Annie. Trust me. The bird darted towards the trees. It landed on a branch and cocked its head at them. She says, follow, said Annie. The bird headed into the forest. Annie started after it. Don't go in there, said Jack. You might run into... But there was no need to finish. The bird and Annie had disappeared into the trees. A snake or a lion, Jack said to himself. Come on, Annie called. Jack moaned. He pulled on his backpack and ran. The peanut butter jar thumped against his back. Chapter 7. Hi there. The forest was cooler than the sunny plains. It was filled with shadows and bird calls. Where are you? Jack shouted. Here, said Annie. He found her in a thick glade. Bright rays streamed through the trees. Green leaves and vines swayed in the dappled light. The little gray bird sat in a tree, twittering at them. Yuck, what's that? Said Annie. She pointed at a round brown thing hanging from a low branch. Bees buzzed all around it. If that's her nest, it's a pretty weird nest, said Annie. That's not a nest, said Jack. It's a beehive. Don't you see the bees? Yikes, said Annie. She stepped back from the tree. But the little bird darted at the beehive and pecked at it. What is she doing? Said Annie. The bird kept pecking at the hive. I don't know. Maybe she's as nuts as you are, said Jack. Look her up in the book, said Annie. See if it says she's nuts. Are you kidding? Said Jack. That nutty bird isn't going to be in this book. Just look. Jack opened his Africa book. He kept turning the pages. Just as he thought, there was no gray bird in the book. Forget it, he said. Keep looking, said Annie. Jack turned one more page, and there it was. A little gray bird, a beehive, and a tall painted warrior with a spear. I don't believe this, said Jack. Then he read aloud. This bird is called a honey guide. It's both a friend and a helper to the Maasai people, an African tribe known for their fierce fighting skills and bravery. Hi, honey guide, Annie called to the bird. I knew you were important. Jack kept reading. The honey guide leads a Maasai tribesperson to a beehive. The bird waits for him or her to scatter the bees and take the honey. Then the bird feasts on the honeycomb. That's cool, said Jack. They work together like the zebras and the wildebeest and the gazelles. Yeah, said Annie, and she wants us to be her helpers. We have to scatter the bees and leave her the honeycomb. How do we do that? Said Jack. He looked back at the book. It didn't say how. Well, maybe we could wave those weeds at them, said Annie. She pointed to some bright green plants that looked like giant fans. Jack put his book and backpack down. He and Annie pulled up the weeds. They waved them near the tree, and the bees scattered. Next, Jack grabbed the tree branch and jiggled it. The hive fell to the ground and broke open. Annie stooped and stuck her finger into the golden honeycomb. Yummy, she said, and when she tasted the honey, try it. Jack stuck his finger in the honeycomb, too. He licked off the golden honey. It was the sweetest honey he'd ever tasted. Now the honey guide can get to her honeycomb, said Annie. Yeah, but she'd better hurry before the bees come back, said Jack. It's weird, said Annie. Honey's so sweet and good, but to get it, you have to go past a lot of dangerous bees. Oh, man, whispered Jack. That's it. That's what? Asked Annie. Jack and Morgan's riddle. I'm the color of gold and as sweet as can be, but beware of the danger that's all around me. What am I? I get it, Annie whispered. Honey. Honey, said Jack, nodding and smiling. That's it. We've answered Morgan's riddle. Let's go home. He stood up to leave and then gasped. Standing in the shadows was a tall man with a spear and a curved sword hanging from his belt. His face was painted in fierce, bright colors. Jack knew at once what he was. A Maasai warrior. Hi there, Annie said in a small voice. Chapter 8. Yum. I wonder what's going to happen when Jack and Annie meet the Maasai warrior. Let's find out. The warrior stared back at Jack and Annie. We were helping one of your young honey guides, said Annie. The warrior was still as a statue. We didn't mean to steal anything, Jack said. In fact, it's all yours. We've had enough. Lots of good honey still in there, Annie said, smiling. The warrior's eyes narrowed. Is he angry? Jack wondered. I'm sorry we're trespassing, said Jack. We come in peace. In fact, we bring gifts. He picked up his backpack and held it out to the warrior. The warrior still didn't move. This? Jack held up a book. Nothing. Jack reached into his pack. He pulled out the big jar of peanut butter. Peanut butter! He pulled out the loaf of bread. Bread! Hey, how about a peanut butter and honey sandwich? Yum, said Annie, still watching the warrior. The warrior stared at the food. We'll show you, said Jack. As Jack unwrapped the bread, his hands shook. Annie opened the jar. We don't have anything to spread it with, she said. Use your fingers, said Jack. Excuse me, Annie said to the warrior. I have to use my fingers, but they're pretty clean. An elephant just do it, Annie, said Jack. Okay. She spread the peanut butter onto a slice of bread with her fingers. At the same time, Jack spread the honey from the beehive on another slice. Jack and Annie put their pieces of bread together. Ta-da, said Annie, handing the sandwich to the warrior. The warrior took the sandwich. but he didn't eat it. He just looked at it. Let's make sandwiches for us too, Jack said, so he doesn't have to eat alone. They quickly made two more sandwiches. See, like this, said Annie. She bit into her sandwich. Yum. Jack took a bite too. He said. It was really good. Finally, the warrior bit into his sandwich. He chewed slowly. This is called a picnic, said Annie. They ate their sandwiches in silence. Then, when they finished, Jack screwed the lid back on the peanut butter jar. Not bad, huh? He said. The warrior smiled. He had a kind of defined smile, dignified smile. Jack and Annie smiled back at him. Then the warrior turned gracefully and vanished into the trees. Oh man, said Jack. Part of him wanted to follow the silent warrior through the shadowy forest. Ready? Annie asked softly. Jack nodded. Annie started to go. Wait, said Jack. He put away the peanut butter and bread. We're going back to the treehouse, right? We're not going to do anything silly like rescue anything or chase birds, right? Those things aren't silly, said Annie. Don't forget that bird gave us the answer to the riddle. Oh, right, said Jack. He looked at the little honey guide. She was on the ground pecking at the honeycomb. Thanks, Jack said to the bird. Have a good feast, said Annie. Jack put on his pack. Then he and Annie started out of the forest. When they passed the pond, they threw the elephant, still splashing. When they passed the pond, they saw the elephant, still splashing in the water. He lifted his trunk, and he seemed to be waving at them. See ya, Annie shouted, waving back. They rounded the bend in the river, then started through the tall grass. As they walked back toward the treehouse, they saw the wildebeest in the distance. There were still some crossing the river. They saw a family of zebras grazing together, and they saw lone giraffes walking from tree to tree eating the leaves, and they saw a bunch of lions sleeping in the shade of a tree, the same tree that the treehouse was in. Oops, said Annie. Jack's heart gave a jump. So there they are, he said. Chapter 9, Tiptoe. So Jack and Annie finally found the lions, but they're in the way of Jack and Annie getting home. So let's find out what they do. Can we make a guess based on the name of the chapter? Chapter 9, Tiptoe. Jack and Annie crouched in the tall grass. There was a big lion, 3 lionesses, and a bunch of cubs. I think they're sleeping, whispered Annie. Yeah, said Jack, but for how long? He pulled the Africa book from his pack and opened it. He found a picture of lions sleeping under a tree, and he read in a whispery voice, After a pride of lions has eaten, they rest for a few hours. Wait, what did they have for lunch? Annie broke in. Don't ask, said Jack, but he kept reading. Sensing that the lions are not hunting at the moment, the other animals graze nearby. If they can graze, then we're safe, said Annie. She started to stand. Wait, Jack pulled her down. Not so fast. He peered around. The words in the book seemed true. The zebras and giraffes didn't seem to be bothered by the lions at all. They might be safe, but I'm not sure about us, Jack whispered. We need a plan. What if we wait here until they leave, said Annie. That could take hours, said Jack. Plus, they might be hungry again by then. Oh, right, said Annie. So here's the plan. We tiptoe, said Jack. Tiptoe? Yeah. That's your whole plan, said Annie. Yeah, tiptoe to the rope ladder, said Jack very quietly. Good plan, Annie teased. Just do it, said Jack. He stood up slowly, and Annie stood up with him. They began tiptoeing through the grass very, very slowly. The lion flicked his tail. Jack and Annie froze. When his tail was still again, they moved again. Suddenly, high-pitched laughter split the air. Jack and Annie stopped. The hyenas were back. They were standing off to the side watching Jack and Annie. Jack and Annie made silent monster faces and shook their fists, but the hyenas only laughed some more. The big lion stirred lazily. He opened his golden eyes. Jack felt the hair rise on the back of his neck, but he didn't move an inch. The lion lifted his head and yawned. His giant teeth gleamed in the sunlight. The lion turned his head, and as he looked around sleepily, Jack held his breath as the lion's gaze rested on him. The lion sat straight up. His piercing yellow eyes met Jack's. Jack's heart raced. His mind raced. He remembered something he'd read. Lions avoided giraffes. Jack looked around. There was a giraffe walking toward the tree that the Magic Treehouse was in. Suddenly, he had a new plan. "Get under that giraffe," he whispered. "Now you're the one who's nuts," Annie whispered back. But Jack grabbed her hand, pulled her over to the giraffe, and underneath it. The giraffe's legs were so long that Jack and Annie could stand up under it. Jack's head barely brushed the giraffe's golden belly. The tall creature froze for a few seconds. Then she moved slowly toward the tree. Jack and Annie walked in the same rhythm as the giraffe. They got closer and closer to the treehouse, and closer to the pride of lions. The big lion stood up. He watched them moving under the giraffe. When the rope ladder was just a few feet away, Jack and Annie dashed out from underneath the giraffe to the rope ladder. Annie scrambled up first. Jack followed right behind her. As they climbed, the lion growled and leaped at the ladder. The hyenas laughed. Jack climbed faster than he'd ever climbed before. He leapt after Annie into the treehouse. Annie had already unrolled the scroll. The riddle was gone. In its place was a shimmering word, honey. Jack grabbed the Pennsylvania book. He opened it and found the picture of the Frog Creek woods. "I wish we could go there," he said. Just then the giraffe stuck her head through the window. "Bye, honey," said Annie, and she kissed the giraffe on the nose. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster until everything was absolutely still. Chapter 10. After Lunch. Jack opened his eyes. His heart was still racing. Hyena's laughter still rang in his ears. "We made it," said Annie. "Yes," said Jack, but it was very close. Jack took another moment to calm down. Then he pulled the Africa book out of his pack and put it with the other books. Annie put the scroll with the other two scrolls. "The giraffe was the true honey on that trip," she said, "sweet and golden with danger all around it." "Yep," said Jack, "and now we just have one riddle to go." "Yep," said Annie. "Ready?" "Ready." They started down the ladder, and Jack followed. She started down the ladder, and Jack followed. When they hit the ground, they walked through the sunlit woods. "It's time for lunch," said Jack. "I'm full from our picnic," said Annie. "Same here," said Jack. "What do we tell Mom?" said Annie. "We say that we ate our sandwiches coming back from the store," said Jack. "What if she asks why?" said Annie. "Oh, just say that we had a picnic with the Messiah warrior in Africa," said Jack. Annie laughed. "Right," she said, "because we didn't want him to be mad at us for taking his honey." "Right," said Jack, "the honey from a beehive that a honey guide led us to." "Right," said Annie, "and that happened after an elephant gave me a shower, and we scared off 2 hyenas." "Right," said Jack, "and after you fell into a mud hole because you were helping a million wildebeest migrate across a river." "Right," said Annie, "and all that was before a giraffe saved us from a lion." "Right," said Jack. Jack and Annie left the Frog Creek woods and started up their sunny street. They were silent for a moment. Then Jack pushed his glasses into place. "We better just say we ate our sandwiches on the way home from the store," he said. "Right," said Annie. "And if Mom asks why," Jack started. "We'll just say it's a really long story," said Annie. "Right," Jack said, "with like 10 chapters. Annie laughed. "Good plan," she said. "Very good plan," said Jack. They crossed their yard, and they went up to their steps through their front door. "We're back," Annie shouted. "Great," called their mom. "Ready for lunch?" The end. And there's a little jar of peanut butter. That was such a good ending. Wow, I love this book so much. Jack and Annie really worked together to solve the riddle and get themselves out of danger. I really loved this one, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for a bedtime story with me. I hope you have a great night's rest and a fun rest of your week for our sports themed week. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys next time to get your play online. Bye.